Under the compressor section, we see almost all of the exact same controls that we saw in iLive. On the left-hand side, we do have the same new options that we got with the gate, including shelf controls for our top and low, or a notch control, as well as side chaining, which is now available across the whole console. In the library, which either can be selected on screen here, or with the library key on the left-hand side of the console, you'll see that there are a large number of options available to us. These are emulations of classic analog compressors used both in the studio and live for years past. The 16T is very popular and probably recognizable as a DBX unit. The 16T has some great options, as well as threshold, compression ratio, and makeup gain. There's a knee button to indicate whether you want a hard or soft knee, and an in-out to indicate whether or not you want to see the output level or the input level. This is a great, more surgical compressor for some specific applications that you need a high amount of control with. However, do note the lack of timing controls can be an issue. The 16VU is laid out a little bit differently, with a total compression, which is basically a ratio control, a threshold control, and a makeup gain control. However, do note that there are no timing controls as well as knee controls on this. The bus compressor is an emulation of a classic SSL bus compressor. You have threshold, attack and release controls, a ratio control, and a makeup gain. This compressor is especially famous for drum mixes and drum bus compression. You also have the same ducker options that we saw in the gate, as it functions almost identically. This is handy because you can give up either your compressor or your gate, depending on the situation. Manual peak and manual RMS are the classic iLive compressors. The Mighty compressor gives us a threshold control, a release control, and an output control, as well as options to change between peak and RMS, or average. The Opto is one of the most versatile compressors that we have emulated here, including 3 attack and release controls for each, transient or RMS controls, a burn control, a threshold control, a ratio control, and a makeup gain control. The Optotronic is an emulation of a classic LA2A style compressor. You have both a side chain control over here, flat, high pass filter at 80, and a low pass filter at 5K. There's limit and compress, which are 2 different ratios. There's a gain, which will push harder and harder into the threshold, as well as turning up your overall volume. There's also a peak reduction control, which is a combo ratio and threshold adjustment. Do note that the farther you push this down, it will reduce threshold and increase ratio at the same time. And finally, we have the Peak Limiter 76. This is an emulation of a classic 1176 style compressor. We have input and output controls. This is a set threshold. It doesn't change, so in order to turn up the amount of compression, you'll have to increase your input and decrease your output to compensate. Then you'll also have attack and release controls, 7 being the fastest and 1 being the slowest. You also have ratio controls, 4, 8, 12, and 20, as well as an all button, which is a classic parallel compression style high ratio compression. There are also meter options depending on what you want to see on your meter.